Man, as some context first, we've seen low interest rates and central bank stimulus that have caused fixed income managers to feel the pressure, causing them to turn further afield to get that yield. Often this means that they go into less liquid assets, and yes, they can have higher returns, but they might be harder to sell on a short notice. Now, this push is partially what was behind GAM's Tim Haywood and his demise. So among other things, an internal review found that some of his investments into illiquid debt securities were done without sufficient due diligence. Now, more recently, we've had Neil Woodford's investment empire that was brought to its knees. So he had a heavy weighting in unquoted companies that were difficult to sell, and it was found that this breached regulatory guidelines twice last year. So finally, we get to this most recent crisis at the Natixis-backed H2o. So first, the FT reported that the fund held more than 1.4 billion euros of illiquid bonds linked to Lars Woodhorst. So he's a German entrepreneur and has a history of troubled investments. Then just after that, the research agency Morningstar suspended its rating on H2o's Allegro fund, citing concerns about the liquidity and appropriateness of certain holdings there. And then by Monday, we get this massive number, $6.4 billion in outflows, assets leaving the fund, while Natixis shares plunged 14%. So I want to get into some of the consequences for this, especially for H2o. So one of its biggest funds under pressure, Adagio. This is the estimated cumulative flows. You can see solid inflows for most of the year, but then this most recent crisis hits. More than 1 billion euros are pulled. So now it's flipped to net outflows. And then there are also some recognizable names who count themselves among the fund's top managers. So I want to emphasize that this is of the last filing. So if these managers had pulled money out over these past 5 days, it's not reflected in these numbers. So some big recognizable names here, but I do want to point out who's sitting at the spot over here. This is its 10th biggest investor as of last filing, GAM, with more than 13 million euros invested.